Good morning, good morning, good morning. Missed one yesterday because I was pretty knackered. Still pretty knackered today. Some of the things I'm resolving to are like kind of confronting, and so it's just weird. It's a weird situation to be in. I think we're in some type of the end of some type of online bubble, financial and societal bubble of acceptance of an entirely new landscape and mechanism that got fully integrated before we tested it, and fully integrated into our governmental systems, into our financial systems, into our information systems, and that has removed stability, and we are unable to it's like overtaken our slowly developed strategies to a point where we don't to scale back to that is, if we need to, which I'm saying now, I think we need to. We can't keep pushing into this because just the mistakes are too massive. Like every section, every segment is making mistakes based on this intrusion by a technology that wasn't tested, and it's destabilizing, and just it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare that I think it's so big that, and also it's so big that it's hard to grasp. Two, almost everyone is so encompassed by it and so surrounded by it that that's what's keeping it going. It's like, this is just how the world is now. Hey, this is how the world is now. But it's going to fail. It can't, because it's removed and this is what the scale thing is. This is what I'm saying. We do not perceive these things as real on our phones, which is just the most irresponsible thing ever. So we've implanted our entire financial and our entire legal and news and information system, communication system between each other into this digital environment. And there is a cognitive disconnect between the real world and this world, which is why I am still here, still saying I have abandoned anything that isn't just, this is just documentation, this is the only way I can do this. It's not going to do anyone any good if I just write letters. Weirdly, just to add on, this is a moment of pure deja vu of, I remember 8 years ago coming to this conclusion somewhere, and then arriving at this position now and saying this. It's the speed of it. It's an out of control effect that has taken on everyone, and it's getting feedback signals between everyone that it's working, and all the feedback signals that are saying it isn't working, which is actually some of the companies that are trying to keep this going, that are benefiting from this, they're actually actively shutting down criticism of this in their own self-protection. But I'm saying that is now gross negligence, because this isn't just about their stock price or their whatever. It's literally about the safety and the security of almost everyone on Earth. There's no, and this is such a small period. This is really 6 years. 6 years of absolute crazy. In this direction, where it just is, it's getting mistaken for this is just what the world always does, but it's not built on stability. It can't fall. I've tested that cognitively on all different points, and it just won't It can't fall back into itself. It falls into chaos, and that is the absolute. It's very much like the Tower of Babel, or like I use a casino metaphor a lot. So casinos existed. You could go into a casino, but you can't turn the world into a casino. And that's what they've done. The digital finance is just lost. It's not going to work. It's like, unless, then you get to the point where you're like, unless that's being done on purpose, that's pretty fucked up. So I have to navigate with that as an option. But it always ends up with me doing the same thing, is just documenting and waiting. And it's lining up pretty much with previous bubbles. And it's following the same kind of mechanism. It's the whole structure. The real biggest problem is that we don't have the people in those. So the people in those places that should be picking this up, which they're not, because their systems have been so automated that they're not even really aware of what their job is. I think I've kind of found that a lot, that phenomenon. And then they are also just completely they are so underprepared to have to pivot into a physical record keeping or physical checking that it will just spiral out. And so many people are so disconnected from any actual principle in any of their lives, like they're so in debt that there'll be no thing to stay around. They'll just bail out. And I see like 5 years of just absolute chaos, because unless I'm in a weird position for my age to have something to backstop onto and to have like a nest egg of substance that wasn't connected into this financial system. And so that's why I'm in this state, to protect that. Whereas most people don't have that. The boomers, or the older generation, they're just so unaware, and they're not connected to it. But I just don't see how this plays out. Like, who's backstopping all of this casino activity? And I'll give you like an example right now. Like this is a vape. This isn't a fucking vape. Okay? This is a vape. I've been vaping for like 10, 12 years or something like that. I mixed up the things. It's like relative to cigarettes, kind of. It's like nicotine. It's very similar to smoking, and I've done it for ages. This, and I reckon this has just got crazier. I won't even fucking touch this after like the last one. Literally. This is either something else that isn't nicotine, or it is such a high level of nicotine that it's just absurd. Like, this is coming from someone who smoked since I was 17 and smoked a pack a day and smoked heavy cigarettes. It's not the same thing. This makes me like, honestly, instantly feel like I'm in it's fucking crazy. It's not good. And they're fucking everywhere. They're not an acceptable thing. That's not vaping. This is like hard drugs just out there. So if you're just smoking this down the fucking Hay Street Mall or whatever, or in a fucking club, it's like and that's what I mean. That comes in, and even the government, they don't know how to deal with it. They go, vaping. No, it's not vaping. Vaping is a healthier, in my opinion, alternative to smoking. This is hard drugs in the disguise of vaping. And it's fucking terrifying. And this is everywhere. This is like easy credit is fucking everywhere. These we are so far off track with no one doing anything. And I've literally got sent to jail for trying to bring awareness to these things. And so I have to leave. And I have to leave and go to a place where I can continue my work of observation and reporting. And because it's actually too dangerous for me to come in here, because it is the complete accepted norm. And that it's terrifying. It's my worst nightmare, probably. So yeah. Thank you. Okay, second topic of the day. I didn't write these down So that's why I'm a bit slow on the start. And I'll describe exactly how I feel. So, and then I'll explain the topic. So the topic is going to be ostracism. Right now, I feel, and this is pretty like, so I might, since I was like probably 17, have wanted to get a sailboat and wanted to sail around the world and do things like that. It's something that I've always strongly wanted to do. I've had a boat. That's a long story. It ran into a lot of problems. And that is where I am going. I am going to do that now because I don't want to live in your system anymore. I don't want to live in your casino world that is disconnected from reality, basically. But within that, because I'd probably do it on my own, I've researched a lot. I've read a lot of books about things that you need to do. There is actually you need to like adapt to be able to do that. There's a different type of life. So there's things that people do like, I can't remember, there's a name for it where they do a different type of sleeping where you need to sleep for 40 minutes and then get up for 10 and then 40 minutes and 10 so you can keep watch while you're sailing, while you're asleep in the middle of the ocean if you're by yourself. That's legitimately what those people do. And there's lots of stories about people like that. It takes a mental toll on your brain to be able to do those things, and you have to be prepared to be able to do that type of shit. It's something that I've been actively training for a long time because I really do intend on doing it. So it's like it's similar to like if you wanted to climb Mount Everest or something, you would train these things. The weird thing about sailing, like long drawn out sailing, is it can be very physically demanding, but it's demanding in this different time frame because it's like marathon thinking, and that includes marathon thinking of being by yourself in the middle of fucking nowhere, which is most people, if I plucked most people, that it's a huge thing. It's like not a very, and like I've tested it in ways, whatever, and still I don't know whether I'm up to that actual task. The ocean is weird for me. I do get seasick. There's things that are really fucked, and so this may be something that I'll do and then have to abandon. It's weird, but I'm pretty determined to do it. But it's something to do with that mechanism that I had been training to do and then being thrown into this ostracized state by our government that's the reason I've been able to do this, because it's the same. And so right now, I suppose the difference is if you went out on the ocean and you did that, that's your thing with the ocean. It's your battle with the ocean. And then you can pull into a port and more than likely they have no idea who you are. They don't know what you're doing, and you can just go there and integrate. You're kind of in and out of society, which I've always been. What this state is very different, because this is like, I'm like that, but within society, and not feeling at all secure about re-entering the society the way it's going, because I'm in conflict with it. I'm in opposition to it. That is so dangerous and so dystopian. And the weird thing is, I know that I'm actively doing it, so I'm aware of it. The amount of people that would be experiencing probably the same as me, but haven't been out in the open, so this is just all way back in their subconscious. That is what terrifies me. They're the people that I'm the most concerned for. Because overwhelmingly I'm seeing a herd mentality that society's moving in that is purely just running on positive vibes at this point. It's like And if you bring negativity into, it's just like that is just attacked and then ostracized. And that would be fine if I was like an alcoholic, like fucking whatever, that, you know, no hoping fucking something or other. That would kind of, do you know what I mean? Like that, and that's what I'm getting perceived at. But it's like all I did is just criticize things that legitimately needed criticism. And then I'm thrown into, because it's easier, it's such a like people are so easy to do that. They're like, oh, that guy's a drug addict, or that guy's a homeless person, that guy's crazy, that guy's whatever. And then it's just, I just slipped in there. It's like, well, that guy's criticizing governmental strategy. Like, they're not the same. They're not the same things. I've spent my entire life having to try and help people that are going down the wrong path. And it is hard and they don't really do it. And then you do sometimes have to let them go. It's a very different thing. They generally aren't like making fucking hours and hours of content and saying how this is a bigger problem. Generally, somewhere in themselves, they know that they're the problem. And I'm not directly, I had to stop doing everything so that I could not be perceived as actually being a problem in anyone's lives. It's what I saw was like, I became the problem because it was easier to have me as the problem than to have these bigger things that I'm criticizing as the problem, because that is too destabilizing to people's like well-being. And that's a pretty common effect. That happens all the time. It's a pretty common scene in like movies, especially the horror movies. Like, did you hear that? Shut up, man. Fucking just keep fucking drinking, man. Like, no, I'm serious. I heard something. That's the position I'm in. And it's because of like uniformed global and governmental and media and whatever, like uniformed ostracism strategies, which were unheard of in my lifetime before that. Even in like severe cases, this had not existed. If you read up on this strategy is known how bad it is. And the problem, so this is happening, but one of the bigger problems I can see happening that in the future, which is absolutely terrifying, is there is a whole generation, say 10-year-olds to 25-year-olds who grew up, who were growing through that period of COVID, who saw this being put down by our government, by the media, by this thing. They just think that's acceptable behavior now. And so that will filter down into every organization, which means schools, which means hospitals, which means politics, government, like financial industry. It's like that cannot go unchecked. It's the same as like if we found out Anthony Albanese has a fucking $1,000 a week meth habit, and do you know what I mean? The reason we'd need to find that out is because we need to go, okay, well, this guy was an anomalous fucking figure that came in and he needs to be disregarded. These ostracism strategies, if allowed to just permeate through society without the limiting, like pre-existing, which existed before this, because it is bullying. It's corporate and governmental bullying, but like bullying's too small a word for it. But yeah, it's like if that's allowed to just be as the precedent for how things are run around here, that will lead to the worst atrocities in very short order, because we have an entire generation of, especially there's a certain type of people that might be going towards positions of power that they now have that in their belt as something they can do. That is an acceptable strategy, which it had not been. And yeah, the friction between criticism and policy is vital for stability. And we're so far in that because we just keep piling people under the rug and plowing on in some literally tech-driven fucking mass psychosis. Thank you. All right, so last one today. what's actually going on and what's going to happen. Unfortunately, based on what I'm observing, the most likely reality that we are currently in, especially in this region, is that this strategy of diving head first, full on into this newly created, what I consider to be dystopian tech encompassment of our entire societies, has been agreed upon as the mechanism, as the accepted mechanism. And that is that's where I jump off, because that's it. A lot of people have always talked about the systems we're in is a slavery and all this stuff, and there is some truth to that. It's a weird arrangement really in the world. This is far different, because this is conceptual slavery. This is like there is no way out of this. If the moment your entire system is absorbed by this digital framework, is the moment you are you are trapped in, like, literally in the Matrix, where you are, your life is kept within a framework of pure imagination, and you are exchanging your life, your labor, your attention, everything, to something that is increasingly getting more and more disconnected from the actual physical world. That has led us to this point. And that just is, it's yeah. The scariest thing, I think, is this territorially. This is a consensus democratic negotiation. And so I'm here trying to bring awareness to this and trying to prevent it, but I am outrageously outnumbered. And so am not succeeding. So from my point of view, you will all enter this. Once you all enter it, it will be impossible for you to ever get out. And it will be impossible for you it will become less and less possible for you to even observe the framework that I'm speaking about. To a point where they don't even seem to care. This seems to be a division in species, and they've just allowed it because they know that, like, my negotiation is basically like, hey, I don't like this, this isn't great, I'm gonna whatever, and then it's like, but if you're all gonna do it, then I just have to be like, okay, I negotiate my own removal from it, and then just live separate from this. And I think there's a lot of people out there, like I hear this a lot, is like, well, people seem to want a bit of both. And I will have a bit of both, you know what I mean? I will have probably a Spotify and YouTube and shit like that. But anything digital, it will be frivolous. Yeah, it'd be like me entering time zone. You know what I mean? I'm not living there. I'm not having my life existing in a digital paradigm in which I know I am not in control of all the back end capabilities of that digital environment, which is what I know. And this is where I should be getting listened to, but I don't, because people don't perceive me as anything because I wasn't driving around in a fucking Tesla or whatever it is. The back end structure of those digital environments is far different to anything we've ever experienced before. It is an entire capture of the world. I don't think that's going to end well. I think there is a base conflict here, because I think that is and I do think it's going to be ended by bringing awareness to the mass gross negligence that these tech companies have participated in. And so it's hard to see how that plays out. I mean, it does line up pretty much with like something like the Great Depression, or something like the tulip bubble, or the financial crisis. But it sits in, because if you look at the key things that happened in the housing crash in 2008, it's the same. It was driven by predatory lending practices to people in a frenzy of housing that led to unstable thing, and then the repackaging of that debt. It's the same. It's just everything is involved in this. It's not just housing. It's literally like everything, down to like government has been absorbed into this thing. So like whereas the government's meant to protect us from this, the government is now pushing this. They're the mortgage brokers, and they're the Wall Street guys. Like, and there was always a bit of that, but it didn't encompass the entire sphere. It was pretty close because it's housing and everyone lives in housing. That's why it was such a shock. But it's like they went straight from housing and then they just dispersed that through everything in a new technology that is massively addictive. There's so much unknown. It's the same as this. You know what I mean? It's the same thing. The fact that this is a physical manifestation about what's going on conceptually in our entire structures of existence right now. The fact that these are just like, do you know what I mean? There's teenagers just walking around with these. And I'm saying as a 20-year smoker that they're fucking insane. It's just and getting perceived as the irresponsible person or the aggressive person or whatever. So I know where I'm at. One thing less and less I don't know is how other regions of the world are going right now. And that seems to be closing in. The feedback from other places, other regions, is closing in. It's becoming less and less, and it's so subtle that you barely notice it unless you're really in it paying attention. But yeah, how is this going to go? It's either, they're just going to push it till it dies. I think human nature is going to do that. We're going to end up with a disconnected society. Someone's going to end up owning everything. And there's going to be a massive hangover for probably 5 or 6 years. And it's depressing. It will be a depression. It's the very nature. I can already feel it. That's why I want to get away. I won't be able to deal with the looks. Just the looks of like shame and fucking all these things. I can't do that. It's sickening to me, to my core. And the main thing is we need to make sure it doesn't happen again. Alrighty, bonus round. as I can't actually explain how exhausted I am. It's like any other time, like in my life, I'd be in a hospital for sure. I'd go and get checked. I'm not exactly sure what it is. It's probably a combination of things. I'd say it's like fucking blood pressure or blood sugar, or go down the list of potential things that may be occurring. Could be there'd be things I'd be getting blood tests and stuff like that, but I'm not going to. This bonus round is like what's left after all that. The internet will exist. If this goes the way I think it will go, there will be because the internet's fine, and this is what I'm trying to show by doing this. If this got accepted, and if it wasn't feared to do what I'm doing, because that's what the majority of why there aren't more people doing what I'm doing is because it's incredibly intimidating and scary to do, and it feels incredibly risky, hence the fucking physical sickness that it's putting on me. I'm just a crazy person. Like I'm a fucking, and so it's like if I'm getting perceived as crazy, it's like, yeah, I am crazy. I'm crazy for doing something this dangerous, this openly. And then that's why there aren't more of me, because most people have some level of self-preservation. Which I actually did it. I was like, it's not a pure kamikaze mission. It was like, well, do I want to die in 10 years? Or do you know what I mean? Do I want to be a slave in 10 years in this weird thing? Or do I want to risk my life now and try and change it? I chose the latter. So what's gonna more than likely happen? Well, the internet's still going to exist. If everyone converted from like doing all their finances and gambling and shopping and fucking buying knickknacks and, do you know what I mean? Porn and fucking all the shit that is selling 7,000 manifestations of everything. Basically women en masse are just using these platforms as billboards for their pussies in order to optimize their fucking mating preference so high in this, which is just like bang on strategy. It's just, this has hacked into their, what they were doing that anyway. It's just like, and this is the place that women, not all women, by the way, just a large segment of women, they optimize. So you couldn't do it before because there were societal things like you'd be called a slut, or you'd be, you know what I mean? If that became too known, you're like, hey, you're spreading your thing too wide. And then you'd get put down by social structures, which are there. They come into criticism like, slut shaming and all this. It's like anything that's been in society, there was probably a decent base reason why that social mechanism was in place. And now the loophole is, it's like now women can just project that out, this net far and wide across the entire globe, and basically sell their identity and a fucking absolutely fictitious version of their identity, because it's using filters and angles and every manipulation strategy you can do, which women, they've always done it. This isn't anti-women. This is just exposure of the hyper aspect. It is hyper. Hyper means like more than possible. Superhuman levels of this. Same with these guys on steroids and guys doing, massive, which I'll say, like, probably you could put me in somewhat of that category as well. I'm not going to fucking pretend I'm not affected by this as well. But that is all leading to just chaos, like just fucking absolute chaos. Like it doesn't, it's, yeah. So these structures, the internet will remain. We need to adapt the culture of the internet. And the biggest one I always use as an example of this is every single person I know who is on Facebook, they all accepted the same strategy to have this large list of everyone they've ever basically come into contact with. And it's weird because like the other phenomenon is like up until about 5 years ago. And so you're carrying around this like decade old list that doesn't make sense generally to everyone's lives now. We, unfortunately, as my generation, my age group, we were just in that. I've adapted out of it. And so I'm not hamstrung down by that constraint. I feel I've liberated myself from that weird, like, and that's not Zuckerberg. That's how everyone started to use it, and no one ever changed it. So you're trapped by just a social norm that has such an easy solution. Like you can just delete everyone and start again. And then you'd be more free to, like if you wanted to start doing music and sing songs, you don't go sing to every person you've ever known. If you want to say something personal about yourself, you don't go project that into this fucking thing of the people that are basically strangers. And so I think all of those constraints have kept us in a fucking stagnated state of society. But so we will, as a culture, once we take the hit of our absolute potential for fucking stupidity, we will then use these structures to design something that does work in this environment from grassroots, from the roots down up, and then we'll create whatever that ends up being will be created by everyone, as opposed to created by the top and then put down. And there's nothing, it was always going to go that way. And by it going that way is what has enabled the technologies that we now have. So that's why I will sometimes throw blame, and I do think there is negligence at a case, but it's like they were on a trajectory that had to go this way. So they have brought a lot of good to the world. So it's how they navigate those final days that will be the telling thing to how they're looked at in history. And I trust them. I trust them to do the right things, especially like Zuckerberg. I put a lot of pressure on him, put a lot of attention, and he seems to respond well. And he will be maneuvering to play this out and to somehow salvage some of what he has. And he does have the brilliant structures there. He's built the framework that this can grow on, almost like people do this with bees or like fungus. They put or reefs, artificial reefs. There is a structure there that can be grown on, and I think whether knowing to or not, he's built a structure that can grow into something beautiful, but it needs to become more dominated by its users as opposed to its owners. Which will leave him in quite a nice position. So I assume he'll be quite happy with that. We will design. Human beings will take this landscape. We won't be given it. We will take it, and then we will design it. And this just is the place we're at. We're at a place where we had a structure imposed on us, and then we will take that structure and grow with it. And this exists everywhere. This is a marketplace, is the best example of this. An organically community-led marketplace is what, you know what I mean? There's a structure put there, there's a street put there maybe by the king, and then the marketplace emerges, and this is where we're at. All right, this is a double bonus round because something just came to me that's as usual with something I'm talking about, terrifying. And it came from listening to Joe Rogan. They started talking about simulation theory, and because a lot of times what happens is I have this like constant striving to figure lots of things out. And then that rubs off against what other people happen to be talking about, and then sometimes I get a fucking huge hit of just like seeing beyond the veil. And I think that's what this is. This, I feel, is up there with one of the most important things. If I can pull this off and explain this, I feel like it's one of the most important things I could ever do. It's my belief that human beings, we are biological creatures in a biological world with and I recommend anyone who thinks about simulation theory, it's like go and walk into the desert with no shoes on and no water until you feel like you're going to die. And then put your faith in the fact that this is a simulation. The simulation theory is the inevitable conclusion of a species that navigates its actual environment using conceptual narrative and story that has strayed off into insanity collectively, to the point where it is perceiving examples of its own species that are trying to maintain and reconnect their connection with the actual environment, with the actual way things are, as odd or as crazy, because collectively there is a collective insanity going on, which has lost track between the narrative and the environment, in which we are now at the epitome. We are trying to create environments that are purely existing in that space, that have no connection. And in order to maintain those artificial spaces, we are destroying our actual environment. And something like simulation theory is one of the most dangerous concepts, because all the rationalization is existing within the narrative world. And none of the connection. It's like that is it. It's what happens when everyone goes into conceptualization free from connection to their source, because most people, like battery hen chickens or like hatchery chickens, they have never had to provide their own life. You do live in a simulation. You live in a simulation. The world is in a simulation. You live in a simulation. And so your only grounding is in a simulation. And that is so clear. The problem is that what I know I have accepted so much for such a long period of time, this alternative viewpoint, which all still remaining Indigenous people would be doing. It's just I was born into your system. So I am the translator between these 2 points. The Indigenous people have been calling you fucking all crazy for a long, long time. They don't think you're crazy. They know you are crazy. And you are just crazy so collectively in such a mob of craziness that the ecosystem of the mob is getting perceived as secure, stable structure. Because whenever, it's like the epitome of this. Nomadic people would wear out a place. They would, they would hunt it out or denude it of everything, and then they'd have to move on. And then when they came back, it would be all good again. So because we are nomadic. Civilization and colonialism, all these things, they're a concentrated form of that. And so as long as the consensus of the mob or of the group is consenting that they're in these environments, they're not doing the due diligence to go back to the environments and check. And that means human beings as well. And human beings are falling off all over the place and realizing that this is going on. And that mob is becoming the largest threat. And then even within that again, so that's why something like simulation theory can exist. Because you are now showing that you will go to whatever delusional concept it takes to maintain the narrative of your insane culture, including the absolute insane thing that you are in a simulation. If you're in a society that is so disconnected that you are assuming you're in a simulation purely because you created simulations, that's the ultimate in insanity. But I'm hacking into your shit, which is the overarching structure, so it gets perceived as I'm crazy. And it's like it's self-fulfilling prophecy. If you get to the point where you're thinking you're in a simulation, then you are using that to excuse implanting people into a simulation, because that's how we operate. We operate through narrative. When, say, the Vikings had warrior narrative that was their structure of their society, so they could go and participate in these things now that we now consider as horrific, like going and raiding and raping and pillaging and all that, right? That's not acceptable now, except that is going on. That simulation fucking theory bullshit going on is the same psychopathic mechanism as the Vikings had being dished out. It's like, well, we could be in a simulation, so that excuses our behavior of implanting people into a simulation. But the simulation, it's not a simulation of like what you're saying. It's justifying psychopathic behavior, because you're not providing a thing. You're just kind of like, yeah, we can just implant them into a simulation and they'll probably just all die, and then we'll steal their shit. It's not a collective like, oh, it's mass psychological torture in a way that it's like the ultimate in warfare. It's like, how do we do it? We get them to all think that they're going into some utopia. We plug them into a thing that they can't fucking escape, and then we steal all their shit. And even that, it's like, if you were at that level where you knew that, then you're just perceiving that as humane. You're like, that's humane. And then even worse, you may not even be aware of it. So then you're like, well, we're just part of a simulation, so we can do whatever we want because nothing's real. All crazy. All, like, basically anyone who has anything up about being in a simulation theory, who is actively participating in establishing this simulation reality, it should be held up in a global court of crimes against humanity. It's what it is. can we scrape together that chord? All right, so last one, because this is like the only thing that makes me not feel like I want to throw up. Also, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm gonna upload this all as a group to YouTube so I can lower the quality of it, because that will just make it quicker to upload. I'm trying to fucking make my process efficient. It's one upload as opposed to 6, and then I'll just share a picture to Instagram, because that's what Instagram is, fucking picture, so then people can navigate to here if they want to. That's the way I'm going to start doing it. Spreading out my reporting in an efficient way that's especially data efficient, because I'm just going to have to keep going down more and more efficient ways to combat this. But yeah, can we scrape together that chord? I think 100% yes. I think we definitely can. I think there needs to be a lot of forgiveness built in to the way this is done, so that we don't escalate tension. We need to give people exits, because I think a lot of this stuff wasn't. It exists in a place that is, like I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt based on where my position is, because I'm in a position of defense and of documentation. I can see the runaway nature that would be easy to fall into, so I am using that to say that there needs to be forgiveness. These people do have relative skills and contributions that they can make to a society that is functioning and healthy. They just got in a state that they weren't prepared for. A lot of these people, especially computer-oriented people, tech-oriented people, lived their life in simulations, created merely for fun. And so it is an accident of history. It's an accident of society. It could be perceived as a symptom of a society before that was not accepting of these people, and so they had a pressure to create their own society, because they in themselves were ostracized, and so there is a bit of retaliatoriness to it. There just needs to be awareness. Also, within the simulation thing, I've experienced in my connection to a divine presence, which is non-existing in these worlds, which exists in the whole world, which could be perceived as simulation. So that's an easy thing to do, but that has never, that's brought me to this conclusion. So I think it's a depth, it's a confidence of depth to go to. You'll notice I had to break away from society to land at these points. Society is the structure. Society is the ship. So yeah, a ship can operate like a simulation, which it is. That's why you're perceiving it as an overall simulation. But that ship is still on an ocean. In what could be perceived as a larger simulation, but that's not us. We didn't fucking make that simulation. That's the arrogance of man. The arrogance of man has a lot to answer for. So from my perspective, of someone who has jumped off your ship, so anyone talking, the majority of people talking about a simulation theory, yeah, you may think you're in a simulation theory, you're on a ship. I was born into that ship. I jumped off that ship, landed in an ocean of a world that is a far larger simulation than anything your little ship may ever conceive of. And that has directed me in things that most of you are so far disconnected from. This is things in nature. This is being followed by a fucking owl while I, you know what I mean? While I run through the fucking bush at night. Put myself in aspects of the map that you would never dream of putting yourself in, completely disconnected from your ship world, while your ship world has, you know, police and fucking armies and shit everywhere. I've existed as another species for the last year. And this is how you would be being perceived by every species on Earth. I feel a uniformed power, not power in the not that type, not power is probably the wrong word. A uniformed intent collectively as a member of the simulation that you are actively at war against. And you are, although maybe perceiving yourself as the power of the world, you are not. You are not. You'll be ended as if it was crushing an ant on your bench top. And that is the world I reside in. There is no doubt in my mind about that. The arrogance of man to perceive that they are the creators of a simulation world is the ultimate. Some of these extensions are the arrogance that man can perceive someone like the devil or Lucifer being the incarnation of evil when he is a creation of the all-knowing figure that we refer to as God, is claiming there to be doubt of God's creations, which is an arrogance of man, which is what is claimed in that story to be the arrogance of Lucifer or of the devil. And so we are falling into that. That is why there is a story there about that. That's a story of man. Anything we can perceive about that level of creation would be being interpreted so low, and then anything worse, anything written down is such a bad model to perceive that, because at any point we are able to plug into that knowing, and that is how we are designed to operate. If we perceive our knowing and our structures to be superior to that of God, we will inevitably fail. Because you're justifying, if those structures were, what is my purpose then? What is my purpose? Oh, you're just crazy. Okay, I'm crazy. I'm crazy and I can function in this world without your structure. And I'm looking to do that. I'm looking to reintegrate into that because your ship is sinking. That ends up in a tricky territory. So why does that exist in your simulation that you built? Because you didn't build a simulation. You are trying to build a prison in a world that is closing in on you because it is trying to at every point expose your mistakes and your shortcomings and the places where you have strayed off the path. And like a child that's gone and spread a ring of lies around and is just, you know what I mean? Is now scrambling to try and protect himself from the web of lies he's created. That is what your civilization is currently doing, and the epitome of that is simulation theory. In simulation theory, explain me. And yeah, I'd love to hear that explanation. Alrighty, I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna use tennis balls to describe the state that I think we're in. Okay, so I'll take one out. These are good tennis balls. These are Wilson tennis balls. Wilson, obviously bringing to everyone's mind Castaway, which I won't over-explain because that, but obviously a bit of a Castaway moment. This tennis ball, this is the end point. A tennis ball that you have probably held in your hand and felt and perhaps volleyed across a net at some time. So a tennis ball is a part of a game called tennis, which was, you can see how that came into existence. It's like, all right, it could have been it's more than likely, tennis was made between two neighbours, perhaps, that maybe, caught each other's eyes every day while they were checking on their sheep or something similar. And maybe, kicked a rock or a clump of soil or something over and were like, huh. And you can see how this evolved, like, hey man, we'll do this tomorrow, and like, why don't we draw some lines and then we can do this again. It's like, and you can keep going to, hey, why don't we compact this ground so we can get this thing? Why don't we, like, hey, look what I brought this like different thing here, which is better, and then they respond and backwards and forth. Tennis is a great analogy of an agreed upon game that elevated to where it is now. With iterations of technology incorporating into it that are then trialed and then agreed upon and then trialed and then agreed upon and then trialed and then agreed upon until they become the uniform structure or the uniform agreed upon design that ends up being the tennis ball. You'll know this if you are a tennis player, that tennis balls, you need to get good tennis balls. You can't buy those things that look like tennis balls that hang on the aisles of supermarkets and play tennis with them. That is crazy, although you technically can. But if you have played tennis with proper balls, then you will know the importance of proper balls when playing tennis to bring the required amount of pleasure. Because if you've trained with proper tennis balls, then going back to something that just doesn't work, it's like it ruins the fun of it. And this is where I think we're at, is human interaction, our societies, we're on that path. And tennis is an expression of that. But somewhere, and this is a phenomenon of the digital tech world, it's intrusion. At some point, collectively, we started playing the digital game collectively. But unlike tennis, which is a agreed upon game that we play, like, we don't, do you know what I mean? I don't go break the law and then play tennis. You can imagine a society that was overrun with tennis, where tennis became the entire world. So everything was a tennis metaphor. Everything, you know what I mean? Tennis was like, to pay for bread, you would play tennis, and or you would exchange tennis balls, because it just became the method of the world. And that has never happened before. For good reason, because we have innovation that would always fit under the whole And we had, sorry, my eyes are itchy because, I don't know. But we had a respect of the structures that we lived within. So you could have, like, tennis is hundreds of years old. And so we had a method of keeping new innovations on the outer to test them before they became too intrusive into our society. My eyes are really itchy and I'm really sorry. It happens when I wet my hair for some reason. If I wet my hair, my eyes get itchy. I wonder what that is. Could be anything. And this is where we have implanted all this tech into every aspect of our lives, but it has massive flaws. There are just gigantic things within it that aren't tested, like that haven't proven themselves yet, and we keep iterating on that same path purely just because it is more efficient and it can be quicker, but they're the only mechanisms at play. Like, and you can see how so a great example of this, if you're Australian or English or South African or Indian or Pakistani or any of the countries that holds cricket as one of its top, and I'll put the tennis ball away because we're going to talk about cricket, as one of its pinnacle sports, and that as a mechanism to interact between countries, as a tool of diplomacy, really, as a tool of connectedness. This is a West Australian, Dennis Lillee, a fast bowler, West Australian, one of the most notorious fast bowlers in the history of cricket, in the history of the game, part of the revolution that came out of the 70s played a big part in World Series cricket, which is an iteration of cricket, again, which was okay, but still came into conflict. You can see the theme I'm getting to. But Dennis Lillee came out at one point with an aluminium bat. Baseball went from wood to aluminium. A whole different range of things between baseball and cricket. Baseball went and adopted the aluminium bat. Cricket didn't. And this is where we're in this. There was a clear protest laid out about an aluminium bat. And it was decided that in the spirit of the game, in the order to structure that game appropriately, that we maintained that it would remain timber and willow and wooden and planted itself in its history. And you can keep going with this, you know what I mean? You can go to, this is what the argument with steroids is. This is what the argument with, and there's been lots. The other one, Kathy Freeman's running suit, Ian Thorpe's full body suit with swimming, and we could play around with these iterations. But what happened is, because this existed off in the shadows, this tech intrusion is the aluminium bat. It may be able to hit it faster, it may think, but I think it actually came down to a lot with the aluminium bat was the noise was offensive. And that's where it's like, think about that it's like the noise. The noise was disrespectful to the idea of the game. And this is where I think the difference between American culture and the English culture is these types of things. And if we can land there, if we can go, hey, we shouldn't have all jumped on to this the way we did, because it's offensive. When I look now in the digital environment and with the eyes of 10 years ago, I'm offended. I'm offended that I have basically prostitutes popping up all the time. I'm offended that I'm seeing the things I'm seeing. I'm offended that the connection between finance and the reality is so disconnected that it's making people act irrationally and self-destructively. All these things are offensive to my ears, my eyes, and my senses. And that's the argument I'm trying to make with tennis balls and with cricket and with Dennis Lillee. All right, I'm gonna do one more. I should just do, but the reason I say that when I say I'm gonna do one more is because this is a reflection of my place that I've been placed into this digital environment where there is no. I know what I'm doing is of value. I know it's important. It's important enough to put my entire life on hold to try and get this message out, which is like, that used to be valued. So I have, my input has been delegated value by a digital economy. Because I'm criticizing the digital economy, my input is devalued to zero, to less than zero, because I'm losing money to put this out there. And that is an expression of that. That in itself is a great example of why this is a suicide mission that you are all in. That should be, because it looks after only itself, and it's not connected to the real world. It's an extraction. It's a what's the word? Not extraction. It's a construction that only exists conceptually and is feeding off the carcass of the structure that allowed it to come into existence. And it is now proven to be so self-protective that it is now within our system we've been in for the last 600-700 years is now should be considered criminal. And we know this, like if I started, this is what a cult is. If I started a cult, there's a level where if that cult becomes a threat to the overall structure, it is dealt with and has been dealt with. This is a cult that has convinced purely by mainly greed and like a misunderstanding of the negative consequences has entrapped the entire world, and is a conceptual cult that is self-destructive in its very nature, because it's an out of control snowball. I've used that quite a bit. That is not taking. I've fallen off it, and I'm like, oi, 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 and he's just like, he's just going to keep going and getting larger and larger and larger until you swallow up the world. And the reason is because this probably started when we went off the gold standard, and this is like the craziest example of it. It's like, this is the largest Ponzi scheme ever attempted. It's hard to really pinpoint exactly where that is, like who is at the helm of that Ponzi scheme. That's why all I have that's of value is an estate left to me by my father, which is held in common law by, when you get to it back, it's by the King of England, by the Crown. That is land. That is a hard value asset. I have myself and I have my tools of my trade. They are all hard assets. That is coming into conflict with an inflating digital concept of money, which I've rejected. that is not just inflating in the normal sense, it's inflating it's in out of control inflation and out of control it's psychosis at this stage. But yet I think the real problem is that it's coming into conflict with all these common law things, and no one will. It's a competition of stories, and this I heard this the other day. Like, our legal system, our property system is it's an agreed upon fiction. We are in the middle of a battle between an existing agreed upon fiction, which is common law, and in this country, a system of monarchy that has distributed down through an arrangement of parliament and things like that, and so that exists, and then this tech-based digital fiction is trying to conquer that pre-existing place with a created fiction that is pure. It's only running on its own steam. Like, there's a thing I wrote down years ago, and I was like, inflation, it makes you feel rich for a bit until it doesn't. The entire stock market, basically every financial system which everyone has uniformly adopted, is now in out of control inflation. Which is just going. It's like it's every aspect of it is not in connection at all with what it used to be, because it's just like it's all make-believe, and it's all just it's being distributed and dispersed and inflated and created and stolen, all on the arrangement that you all are continuing to do it. But I think the most terrifying aspect of this, if you get like Weimar Germany, people were wallpapering their house with the currency. We're not going to get there because it's digital. We can't see it. We can't see that this is what we're in, and they keep adjusting the, like, say Netflix. It's like Netflix is cheaper than Foxtel was, and things like that. And that kind of absorbs a lot of this inflation. It's like they've just degraded society down to a point of nothingness, where everyone is just nothing. We're just consuming these things and degrading our asset base. All of us, except some people won't be, and the game will be played out at that level. It's the phenomenon of Fortnite. My kids play Fortnite, and the amount of money pumped into that game to provide your character with something that could just be an option, but it's like it's like, no, we want real money. We want real money for this imaginary thing, and that's where we are. But we're in a sphere that just keeps expanding, which would all be fine if we weren't biological creatures that relied upon our land base to provide us what we need. The larger that conceptual imaginary world becomes, the more destruction it causes to our environment, and the less able we are to observe that. That is suicide. So you are going to come in, there is going to be wars unless this is stopped. Yeah. I don't even feel like I scratched the surface of what I'm trying to say.